someone who was at the swearing-in ceremony today, former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Mr. Speaker, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
The president has laid out a lot of ideas, some executive orders, some big sweeping policy ideas. How many of those, I mean, realistically, listen to them, how many of them are more aspirational than doable?
What he listed now, I think, are most of are all doable and achievable. And remember, this is the difference. He's already done the job before. He's been out of office, focusing greater. Now he's coming back. He's not going to wait for some staffer to tell him how to do it. He also feels as though he allowed people to slow them down. Certain things he wanted to do first, they said, no, do that later, and he didn't get around to it. So he's not going to waste any time. Think about how quick he put his cabinet together, faster than before. He's get some confirmed today. He's got a majority on both sides that he knows in 2 years from now it's hard to keep the House. You usually have a 9-month honeymoon. You've got a reconciliation. It's tough. They decide 1 or 2 bills. That really only matters how big do they make these. So when he talks about the border being a disaster, that's a way that he can take care of the border without maybe doing a bill. So that makes it easier that you don't have to do the 2 bills. But he will push this Congress more than this Congress knows they want to be.
Well, I was going to say some things he can do by executive order, but to really make an impact, you do have to pass legislation. And here in the House, and you know, nobody could probably count heads better than you sitting at this table. I mean, he's got a 1-seat majority in the House.
It gets worse, right? Because, okay, now it's going to drop by 2 seats because you're going to have Elise and Mike Waltz go in. Those Florida seats won't get filled till April 1st. The New York seat won't get filled till later. So it's going to be very difficult. And this is the first time in modern history the majority in the Senate is larger than in the House. That's a big deal.
What happens when, with the next time there's a challenge for the leadership, the Speaker leadership? What happens?
Nothing. Gates is gone. It was all about an ethics report he didn't want to come out.
Matt Gaetz.
Yeah, Matt Gaetz. Don't sleep with 17-year-olds and then we'll be okay.
Oh, gosh. Well, we know that Kevin McCarthy and Matt Gaetz, there's no love lost there.
Well, no, there's nothing about it. If you read the ethics report, that's exactly what transpired. He put the motion to vacate in the same day on October 2nd that he put it in. He came to me to try to make me influence it, and I wouldn't influence it. That's all there is.
Can you speak to the urgency? Because he has 4 years in office. What does that really mean in real terms in terms of how much time he has to get his agenda passed?
Well, the difficulty here on any presidency, when it gets towards the end, you're less powerful or less able to get through. He has a House and a Senate with a small majority. You've got a tax bill out there. You've got reconciliation, so you can deal with that. You've got executive powers, but they don't last forever. This is a man that wants to leave a legacy. This is a man who knows the job. This is a man that doesn't get a lot of sleep, and he will push people to make things happen. So I think he's going to be rather productive these first 9 months.
One of the things he just mentioned, and he's alluded to it 1,000 times, and it seems intent to do it, which is pardoning some of those who have been convicted in connection with January 6th. You were there on January 6th. You were quite disappointed in the president's actions that day. What do you think if he pardons some of these people?
The president has the power to do that. This is the difference.
No question about it, but
okay,
what do you think?
But this president told the American public why he was campaigning for office. If I'm elected president, I will pardon these people. Now, but compare this to Joe Biden, who said he would never pardon his son, who now on the very last day, in the last 30 minutes, pardons his entire family.
What do you make of that decision for him to make those pardons and to do it now?
Terrible. Terrible. Think about what everybody else had gone through. Why pardon your family? Well, it makes no sense to me. Why pardon January 6th from the idea of the elected officials? All it does is put a cloud over that you did something wrong. These people didn't ask for it, but you must know something that other people do not. And why do you wait to 30 minutes before? Why did you tell the American public you would never pardon your son, and you do it? Now, the difference here is whether you agree or disagree about what President Trump's going to do, he told the American public ahead of time. They put that into consideration whether they vote for him for president. So he's just keeping a campaign promise.
There's no question. I mean, he was as clear as day about what he was going to do, and now he's going to do it. I just wondered for you, as somebody who was there, how does this sit with you?
He's not going to do it. From what I know of it, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a blanket pardon. There's some people that have been sitting in there that I don't believe have been given their justice. They've just been sitting in there. I don't think that's right.
Is retribution still on the table for this new president?
See, this is a thing that bothers me the most. For the people who are opposed to President Trump, all they talk about is retribution. I have not seen him put retribution into anybody when he has had the power.
But he's talked about it.
But he's talked about it, but I've only seen the other side do retribution to him and everybody else. I will tell you this. 4 years ago, when President Trump left office, everybody who worked for him got blackballed, that nobody could be hired, that nobody could work any place. And then everybody had to go through attorneys. Everybody was getting prosecuted. Everybody was being looked at. President Trump had to go through it. And what the Democrats did to President Trump, they helped elect him by prosecuting, because what they misread with the American public, when they would prosecute him for something they would never anybody else in America, that's when you literally felt across America, this is wrong.
And yet, Mr. Speaker, the president has put in place, or hopes to put in place, somebody like Kash Patel to lead the FBI, somebody who has made a list of people he decries as deep state individuals. Critics call it this enemies list. You heard Pam Bondi, who he wants to be his next attorney general, get questioned about this. How do you square that, what you're talking about here with the actions that the president's taking?
But what I listen to, too, is that they would follow the rule of law, that they wouldn't put...
Do you believe Kash Patel would do so if he was...
I do believe so, because I know Kash Patel. And, you know, it's an interesting thing. I've watched people sit back and say, I want to go after you because you say you might do something in the future. We live in America, right? You're innocent, proven guilty, but now they're going after this. They will uphold the rule of law. But they saw the other side of this, that people using prosecution against them that wasn't right. I think they'll be more apt not to use it.
I mean, we don't have time to get into all, but we talk about upholding the rule of law. I mean, there was a prosecution, for example, in Florida for mishandling classified documents that seemed to be as clear as day. I mean, pursuing a prosecution under those circumstances is not an abuse of the rule of law. It's a pursuant of a vindication of the rule of law.
Okay, but this is all fair to you. Okay, that was on President Trump. But at the very same moment you're saying that, you had a President Joe Biden that had the documents inside his garage. But this is something that was different than the two. He had a document when he was a senator. I've been part of the Gang of Eight. At no time, at no place, a House or senator could ever take a classified document. Done deal. But he had one. Did he get prosecuted? No. What did they say? He's too old. But he's sitting as the President of the United States. So this is what we talk about, fair treatment. So when people on the other side of the aisle say, oh my God, President Trump may do something in the future, he hasn't. Give us the time and place. Let him govern. If he does something wrong, that's appropriate time to make an argument. But right now, I just watched a nation have an opportunity to heal. I watched world leaders come to this inaugural. I've watched people who spent millions of dollars against him sit right behind him and are excited.
What do you think
I watched titans in business say they're changing their process of how they run their social media companies to be fair.
What do you think, though, about someone, yes, there were world leaders here, but someone who is calling for, Greenland to be taken, Panama Canal to be taken, sovereign...
Well, look, knowing President Trump for a long time, he's always a business person, right? So it's always kind of a negotiation. And what he's trying to do is put America in a better place for that negotiation. Now, he has a legitimate argument about the Panama Canal. If China controls both entrances of the canal, that puts the future of America in jeopardy, especially from a military point of view, or if we need to run commerce around. So if he talks tough, is this a Teddy Roosevelt? Maybe that's a good moment. Maybe it's a shock moment to China, and maybe it's a moment to Panama. Don't let China control this canal.
Can I just say that as we're having this robust discussion, we're looking inside the Capitol. There's a luncheon taking place right now.
This is a great luncheon.
Per tradition. Kevin McCarthy, the food's good.
No, it's a small luncheon. It's a nice luncheon where you get together. The former presidents will be there. It was one of my favorite things, the Statuary Hall.
Actually, I think this time around the former presidents are not.
They're not this year. And 4 years ago, it was canceled because of the pandemic.
We
But
walked around.
But we'll see. But this is one of the nice traditions where people do mix and mingle, and one of those rituals that people, I think, like to see, that our country, even if just for a day, even if just for a moment, that there's collegiality.
A chance to mix with those titans that you were just talking about. And do you see any risks, sir, for overreach in his goals?
I think it's Justice Kavanaugh talking to Mark Zuckerberg.
That's a moment.
Yeah,
that's a moment. if he wants to accomplish things with mass deportations, that there wouldn't be sufficient funding to actually make that happen, or there wouldn't be the political will when it reaches into farm communities. You're from Bakersfield, California, where undocumented workers keep the economy going. Is there a risk that what he has promised could come up against political problems for him?
Well, this is where you got to understand what is he said, even in today. He's not referring to those people. He's referring to those more than 1.3 million who are sitting in jail. He's referring to someone who came here illegally and have created a felony, who killed somebody, who's had raped somebody. He says, let's remove them. If he gets to a different level, that'll be a different discussion, but he has not said that yet. So I think from a standpoint for America, we should pause and let's get this, because I've watched cities across America, New York, everywhere else. Massachusetts is the greatest threat, the state emergency is the southern border.
Mr. Speaker, when I interviewed him, he was very clear. He wants to remove everyone who's here illegally. You're right, he wants to start with the criminals. Absolutely, that's his focus right now. Is that something that you think is feasible? Would you support that?
Removing the criminals? Yes.
Well, everyone. In addition to the
look,
criminals.
to be fair, if somebody
it's
comes here illegally, you're breaking the law. So let's create a country that maintains its law. But I don't think, if you look at America, 85% of America agrees, if you have come here illegally and you have committed a felony, you need to leave. And I think that's where we're starting. That's where we're going.
Don't go anywhere. Don't run to the luncheon for the.
I didn't get invited this year.
I want to go to Garrett Haake, our senior White House correspondent, who's got some information on this subject. We were just talking about these January 6th pardons. What do you know, Garrett?
Well, not as much as I'd like, Savannah. We're still waiting to see exactly what is going to come down from the president and his team today. But we know that there is a list prepared by President Trump's team for those pardons, and it is expected to come down today. Now, the president has a menu of options at his disposal here. If he wants to pardon folks who have perhaps already completed their sentences, he could pardon as many as 700 people with little practical effect. These are people who've gone in and out of the justice system already. If he wants to pardon folks who are convicted of or pled guilty to non-violent offenses, which is what J.D. Vance has suggested that he might do, the numbers could be even greater. I think what Donald Trump has described and what his team has described as a gray area is where this gets a little bit sticky here. Maybe someone who was charged with a violent crime who pleaded down to something less. It is, I think, the big question is are those folks who assaulted the Capitol police officers, convicted of assaulting the Capitol police officers, the same folks who protected Speaker McCarthy and all these other lawmakers and we reporters up here on that day, among those who are on that menu of options that the president will choose from. Nevertheless, we do have reporting now confirm that that list does exist. It's a matter of time before the president signs off on it and we see who's on it. I will tell you at that rally last night, just down the street at Capital One Arena, he said that his supporters would be very, very pleased with what he ultimately decided to do about those January 6th hostages, as he calls them. Savannah?
All right, Garrett, thank you.
All right, let's bring in our senior business correspondent, Christine Romans, now for more on President Trump's actions on energy and the economy.
Yeah, well, what we're hearing from the White House and the second administration of White House officials is that they're going to try to make America affordable again. We expect the president's going to start signing these memorandum of understanding and these EOs soon. But the point here is they want to unleash America's energy resources, reliable and consistent energy resources. I think you're going to hear about Alaska. We heard from the incoming White House officials earlier today that they really want to be able to unlock natural resources, mining minerals and also energy in Alaska, and that of course has been something that the Biden administration has tried to limit the amount of leasing oil and energy on those lands. I think you'll also hear about what the new White House calls the EV mandate. They want to make it so that American citizens don't have to think about their shower heads, their light bulbs, some of these things. You've heard Trump on the campaign trail many times say that Americans are being pushed into energy efficiency unfairly.
early, so you'll probably hear more about that. And we're expecting a memorandum of understanding on prices and getting prices down. So not necessarily an EO, an executive order on prices, but you'll hear the White House talk about the ways that every single agency can try to lower prices for American citizens. And again, when you talk about energy and what the president wants to do with energy, he's hoping to lower energy prices, and that, Lester, will lower prices for everything else. So that's how they're sort of looking at the inflation part of the story. And then, of course, he will declare a state of emergency in energy and also at the border. And of course, mass deportations and border actions, of course, could also affect the economy in the days and weeks ahead. So waiting to see exactly what of these 5 binders of executive orders and memoranda the president is going to sign in the coming minutes and hours. Lester?
Christine, thanks very much. While we have the speaker, I want to get your thoughts on the pardoning. We learned a little bit more information on the pardoning of J6. Those are convicted. What do you think?
Well, I mean, if he's going back, this is something he said during the campaign, so he's following through on his promise. If he's pardoning people who have already served their time, I don't think he'd think of people big argument. I think the only place people have a big agreement on, and it doesn't look like he's giving a blanket one, for those who are doing any damage to the Capitol Police officers, I think there would be a difference.
So there's a line he probably won't want to cross.
Yeah.
It is worth noting that as the president is delivering these remarks, as he's talking about the potential for these pardons, he's doing so in the place where we saw what went down on that day, on that attack on the Capitol. And it is only the 3rd time that President Trump is back at the Capitol since January 6th. And here he is, and we heard him in those remarks, continuing to push those election fraud claims, those election fraud lies that he pushed after the 2020 election, which obviously were not the case at the site where his supporters sought to overturn the legitimate results of that 2020 election. And so I think it is a moment where we're talking about these images of unity, these images that, as you say, Mr. Speaker, the president is looking to extend an olive branch, but there's also a gravitas to this moment as well, I think, for a lot of people in that building.
But there's something here underreporting here, okay? This is the first time in more than 30 years a Republican president won the popular vote. You sat at this table for hours wondering whether this election would be close or not. He won every single swing state. The country has made a decisive decision. They have all the information about January 6th. They have everything else. The only thing new they have today is that the past president, Joe Biden, just pardoned his entire family. His entire family just got, his brother, who said he wasn't involved with his son getting money from China, that we found out that became true. A laptop that they told the American public before the last election, and they used 51 people. Former CIA director said this was false, when they knew that it wasn't. I mean, to go back and pardon things and lie about it is real difficult.
Just want to point out, this is a signing ceremony right now. You're understanding these are not executive orders.
These are things, this is on the Senate side. It's right after you become president. You go in there, it's the different papers of becoming president that he has to sign. He has a number of pens. And if you'll notice, let's look at that pen, because before all presidents had these little ink pens. He likes the big felt ones, changed it. And he did it. It saves money. But he loves them, right? And he'll go through a number of these.
We were talking about how he likes the optics and the pomp and pageantry of these moments.
Okay.
You've been there for many of them.
I've been there for many of them, but it's also, he has a role as a president, explaining it to the American public, but also putting it out to the nation and to the world, and he's good at that.
Mr. Speaker, I wonder how you reflect on, I mean, when we're talking about January 6th, I mean, there was a moment, as I said, you made no secret of your disdain. You said that you felt he was partly responsible for the events that transpired. And then you made this consequential visit to Mar-a-Lago. And many people feel that at the moment he was at his greatest political peril, that you had gone down there and your critics would say rehabilitated him. And I wonder whether you give yourself that much credit.
I don't.
And whether you ever
that much credit. I should be in the room.
I mean, I don't know if he does, but I guess what is your take on that? The fact that when you went down there, I mean, how do you reflect on it? Do you think that you had an impact on his comeback that started right then and there?
Nobody can take credit for his comeback but himself, because no one has this much grit to live through that much. If I think there is an attribute of an outside that actually boosted him, it was the Democrats when they prosecuted him for something that wasn't needed.
Okay, but this was years ago, though. I mean, this was even prior to that. He was kind of
When I went down there, it was what, January 28th, 4 years ago. I went to see my friend who had left office, who had been to go check on him, see how you're doing, just like I do any other time.
It was interpreted
president
as
is
a
my friend.
lifeline.
It was
Interpreted by many as a lifeline to him politically.
I got a phone call saying, you want to get lunch? I said, yeah, I'll come have lunch. And so, however the press wants to do it, he's my friend and somebody I'm going to look after.
How much are you still advising and counseling him on some of the issues that are coming up? You talked about, for example, the threat from China. We're looking ahead to the potential for this TikTok ban to be put on pause in
I
another 90
worry a
days.
great deal, not just about China, but the axis of evil. I mean, one of the things I created coming speaker was the Select Committee on China that's been one of the most successful bipartisan committees that they've had in Congress. And I think it's important because we become too dependent. And remember, for those who love to study history, 16 times in the world history, the number 2 has surpassed the number 1. Only 4 times have they not gone to war. And so America has a dual responsibility here. When you have these axes of evil trying against us, we got a large debt. We've got to be smarter about, instead of worrying about how we're going to fund government for the next 30 days, are we looking for the next 50 years? And something the president's doing today is important. Whoever captures AI and quantum has an advantage. But you will never get AI without energy. And what the president's doing when he's unleashing energy, he's bringing down inflation, but he's weakening Russia, because they need that price to be higher to sustain their economy. This is a smart move that he's resetting the table around the world. It weakens Iran, so it weakens this axis of evil. It also supplies more American jobs. We help our allies by supplying liquid natural gas, but they don't rely upon Russia. And it's a resettling that the world is going to become safer, but America will be stronger.
What do you make of the fact that he says he's going to revive TikTok and potentially give them this 90-day extension, which we
Okay,
expect would be
I was with the
worse.
president the last time when he was concerned about TikTok, but remember what he was concerned about TikTok? It was the data. So he can revive TikTok. He would have revived TikTok when he was getting rid of it last time.
It's not just the data. The data is one issue. Okay, essentially, the Chinese Communist Party potentially has access to
For
the
the
data.
ownership of who has it and the protection.
That's thing one. The other, though, is the influence, the misinformation, the potential that the Chinese Communist Party controls an algorithm that millions of Americans see are heavily influenced by. We can look no further than Middle East
But what the
politics to see
president's
that that's
saying,
the case.
in this bill,
How does that address
he's
that?
given 90 days, okay? So what he's saying, I'll revive it right now, and in 90 days,
Yeah,
I
but
have
he's
to
saying
make a
maybe
good thing.
50-50 ownership. How does that address the national security concern?
Well, I think within there, he'd be able to do it, just like any other company, is what China and others do, who has 51, who has 49, and I think in there, he'd be concerned about the algorithm, he'd be concerned about the data, he'd be concerned about the influence. But that wouldn't be the only place.
Mr. Speaker, you've been generous with your time. Thank you for coming by.
Hey, always
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good to see you, sir.
We're bringing our senior